Hello, everybody. This is Sander Lutz from Decrypt, and I'm joined by my colleague, Liz Napolitano. And we are joined, of course, here today with Binance CEO Richard Teng. Richard, thanks so much for speaking with us.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Sander. Thanks, Liz, for having me.
To get into it, and because Richard, we have not spoken before, I'm sure it has been, not even a year, but a wild 10 months for you since taking the helm at Binance. And obviously, in many respects, these were big shoes to fill from your predecessor, Changpeng Zhao, in several ways. But one is that he was certainly, you could safely say, a personality. And, on crypto Twitter, he was quite a staple. In the degen world, he knew what he was talking about. He got into the weeds and the replies and all that. So I guess in that sense, in terms of the persona that CZ represents, even in those two letters, what has it been like filling those shoes when it comes to even what it means as a personality to be helming Binance?
First of all, let me make this clear, right? CZ has shoes so big that it's impossible to fill, right? So he's a giant, he's an icon, he's a legend within this industry. So from the very beginning, it was never the intention, and I don't think I will be able to fill those gigantic shoes. But what is important is he has left a very important enterprise, and I think he entrusted that enterprise in the hands of myself and a few key management. I'm very grateful, very humble, and privileged with that honor that he has invited me to take up this role together with the rest of the co-founders. And we are on a journey. So when CZ was running the show, again, you remember 2017 when he started this, crypto was, something that was not on the radar of regulators and institutions. Crypto adoption was very little, then less than 1%. And he started that journey. He's the founder CEO. And he was running an enterprise which grew very quickly to become what it is today. But I am responsible for bringing this enterprise forward. The landscape has shifted quite a fair bit by now, right? So if you look at the direction of travel, there are more and more rules and regulations coming into this space. The direction of travel is very clear. 2024 has been a landmark year with institutions starting to embrace this space, which is very pivotal for this industry, right? So now I'm leading a company that instead of being a founder-led company is a board-led company. So it's very different in terms of structure. Again, I have a very strong team of key management working very closely with me, working very closely with the board of directors, and we have very dedicated staff. And we continue to build a sustainable future for this very important enterprise.
There certainly have been a ton of changes in the landscape, even in the last 10 months, like you were saying, with regards to regulation and interactions with governments and even the reputation of crypto. And also, your background certainly was much different than CZ's, coming from a lot of experience with government and with regulators. Would you say that there is anything about how Binance is run today by you that is substantially different from how it was run by CZ? And that may relate to interactions with regulators or anything else, just in terms of your specific management style?
Well, to be fair, the pivot of Binance happened even when CZ was running the show. I think since 2021, 2022, we realized that compliance is going to play a much heavier agenda in terms of the global landscape. And so since then, we've been investing very heavily into our compliance program, right? So in terms of spend in compliance program, it was 158 million in 2022. That went up to 213 million last year, and that will go up even more sharply this year. So we continue to invest very heavily into the compliance program in terms of not only in terms of intellectual personnel, processes, framework, but also in terms of technology, in terms of AI. How do we make the job much easier for everybody, given that the amount of data that we have to process, the amount of screening we have to do, right? So we have actually invested very heavily. But in the last 10 months, I think what has been significant, as I mentioned, is a quite a different enterprise. The company has grown by quite a sizable amount by now. So a more traditional corporate structure in having a board of directors, and we have a board of directors of 7 now, with 3 independent directors, is a format that stakeholders like regulators are much more familiar with. So we are pivoting the company into that format where you can have deep conversation with regulators around the world on what we are, who we represent, and what we do. And those conversations are ongoing in many parts of the world. We are very happy that we have announced a few more regulatory approval throughout the course of this year with support from policymakers and regulatory agencies throughout the world. So we have 19 by now. Hopefully, we can announce a few more before the end of the year, making us the most regulated exchange globally. We just secured India, which is extremely big market. Indonesia, which we announced 2 weeks ago. And earlier on in the year, places like Thailand, Kazakhstan, Dubai, etc., etc. So we continue to make huge inroads in terms of our conversation with regulators and making our platform the safest, the most secure, the most regulated globally.
On that note, just when it comes to, and you've been talking about this a lot in recent weeks, establishing Binance as, a more traditional company structure, gaining the faith of these regulators around the world. You recently said that a major component of that is establishing a global headquarters for Binance. And you acknowledge that that's something that regulators like. That's something that gives that legitimacy of a traditional company. That being said, given that importance, what is the timeline there for establishing a company headquarters? Because of this importance, is this something that you hope to announce by the end of this year or within the next 2 fiscal quarters, or what does that look like?
And you're absolutely right. It's an important subject matter, which is why we are spending a lot of time in terms of properly deliberating all the decision points, right? It's necessarily complex. I think there are various parameters that we are studying very carefully, working with several jurisdictions that we have identified as key potentials, and we're in deep conversation with those jurisdictions. The elements of consideration include things like global taxation agreements of those jurisdictions, right? That if we domicile ourselves there, what would it look like? The whether it's pro crypto, whether we can base more headquarters function in those places where ease or bring in talent. So there is a multitude of factors that we're considering, and we are spending a lot of time to make sure that we do a very comprehensive job together on board of directors in order to chart the path forward for ourselves.
When you say that there are a few key places you're looking at, does that mean you're down to a few finalists, or how many places are you currently down to?
There are several very strong candidates. Again, all these discussions are confidential, so I can't quite share with you. As you can appreciate, any discussion with governments and regulators are necessarily confidential. So, but we are taking this very seriously, and we're looking at a few key candidates which we have very close discussion with now.
So given the variety of issues at hand here, and given the variety of discussions you're having with different regulators throughout the globe, would you say that this global headquarters plan is something that's a year away, 2 years, or it's something much further down the horizon to really implement it as you guys would like?
Well, we will try to get it done as soon as practicable. We don't stipulate a time, but there's vested interest to get it done, right? So we are working on it. As and when we are ready to establish, announce, I'm sure you'll be one of the first to get to know about it.
We'd like to be. But on that note, or shifting gears a little bit, earlier you spoke about how CZ had big shoes left to fill, right?
Yes,
looking at
shoes.
Impossible, yes. So, I mean, just given the success of the company, particularly from its early years to now, in terms of, especially revenue, right? Like it's the largest exchange in the world based on daily trading volumes. How have you guys been on revenue? In August, you told CoinDesk that since the 5th month of operation for Binance in 2017, when the company was founded, Binance has been profitable. That's to say that every single financial quarter, Binance, since its inception, Binance has been profitable, correct?
Yeah, so, I mean, we are very blessed in that sense. I mean, Binance is in strong financial position on that. So maybe if I can just give you some numbers, right? I can't go into details, but just looking at user numbers. This year alone, for year to date, we have onboarded close to 50 million new users, right? So that brings our user count to about 230 million users globally. So we started the year at 180 million. So that pace of growth is very exponential. And that also reflects crypto's very rapid pace of growth. So we have 230 million users. The first 100 million users took us about 2 years to onboard. The next 100 million users took us about 26 months to be exact. So slightly more than 2 years. And then you see the pace of growth getting much more rapid. So the third 100 million users will take us even a shorter period of time. And user numbers continue to grow across the spectrum. This year, we see a lot of institution interest again. If you look at the likes of BlackRock, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, Morgan Stanley, all jumping onto the bandwagon. The top 100 financial institutions around the world, all having their crypto agenda, crypto strategy, a crypto desk starting to trade crypto on that front, compared to, which is a marked and significant difference compared to 2 years ago. I think that speaks volume. That gives a lot of credibility into this sector, and that brings in a lot more new liquidity and users. So we are bullish for the future.
So you speak about user growth. Is there any particular region in particular where you're seeing an explosion in user growth? Because I know, for instance, Coinbase, which is predominantly based in the US, they were experiencing a lot of user growth issues back during the market downturn of 2022, 2023, and that caused them to have, I think 6 consecutive quarters of loss. Where are you guys seeing growth, and how has that fueled your revenue?
Actually,
it's on the retail side and on the and on the institutional side as well.
So we are seeing growth across the spectrum in all different regions. So different regions have different bright sparks. But I would say, as a general parameter, we are seeing the fastest pace of growth in places where demographics is younger, where you have young adults. I mean, if you look at data throughout the globe, investment data, the young adults, their first venture, their first investment now in any asset class is most likely crypto than otherwise, right? So if you look at any places with a higher percentage of young adults, those are where we experience the fastest pace of growth. And also in places where, financial inclusion are slightly lower compared to other places, right? So if people have difficulty getting access to the banking system, payment system, crypto being 24/7, being the cost of crypto in terms of remittance, transfer, payments is at a fraction of what traditional financial institutions charge. That makes it the ideal choice in many parts of the world. So we're seeing a huge take-up rate in many of those parts of the world. So I would say that, all things being equal, when you see these two parameters, you see a very sharp take-up in terms of crypto adoption.
Would you say Latin America then, or in Africa?
Latin America, different parts of Asia Pacific, we are seeing very strong growth there. Different parts of Middle East, North Africa region, we are seeing very strong growth there. So we are seeing strong growth all in different parts of the world. And there are different pockets that they are doing very well.
I just wanted to follow up or zone in on one of the things Liz was just asking about. Given Binance is a private company, and I know you said there are currently no intentions for you guys to offer an IPO or go public, a lot of information, despite the size of Binance, is private. And so, like recently, for example, when you said or just said now, this information about how Binance has been remarkably profitable every quarter, from mid-2017 up into the present, that defies a lot of industry trends, right? Like for publicly traded companies such as Coinbase, we can see like when the crypto market took a hit, like 2022, mid-2023, it was rough for a lot of these companies, and a lot of them had losses. So, and I know you weren't CEO then, but you're still at the company. How was Binance able to remain profitable even in, those really tough quarters where a lot of the rest of crypto struggled?
Well, I think there are various things to look at. I mean, if you look at our volume, and there's a lot of transparency about the volume that we do on Binance. I think that itself speaks volume. But also, Binance has always been fiscally a very prudent company. So we are very prudent in terms of our spending. We choose our spending very wisely. We try to make this all-weather company, a very sustainable company. So we're very careful with the spend, regardless of market condition. We don't splurge when market conditions are good, and we don't cut back too much when market conditions are poor, because we are very confident of the future. And what we are really looking to build is a very sustainable business built that is as evergreen as possible, right? So it's built on strength, it's built on people, resources, etc. So we continue to invest very heavily into all the different areas, even in down cycle. Actually, down cycle is the time that we tend to do a lot more building because things get less hectic, and it's much cheaper to invest then. So we like to invest a lot during down cycle, right? If you look at the company. So, but we have always been very prudent fiscally with our spending. And I think that is also part of the culture, part of the DNA, and that is attributable to the success. One of the key focus for us is always to make sure that our users are protected, right? So it's always a user first, user protected company. So we will do our utmost to make sure our users are protected on that many fronts. So, I mean, if you look at what we have done, we are the first to come out with things like SAFU to make sure that if there's any untoward event, there's a security breach of some sort, that there's enough funds to be set aside to protect our users, right? So we always look at areas, and we are the first to really push for proof of reserves on that front, right? And not many other exchanges has really resorted to that level of transparency. But these are things that we continue to do. And this year alone, we spend hugely on security, and security is a major consideration for many players and exchanges and for our users, right? So this year alone, we help our users through the usage of things like AI, avoided potential loss of 2.4 billion from potential scams, transfers to things like poison wallets, possible frauds, etc. And if they have transferred wrongly to addresses, we help our users recover their crypto transfer. So there are many things that we do that are over and beyond what regulators prescribe, but we do this really to make sure that our users' interests are protected.
Now, I wanted to go back to that point about fiscal prudence. You speak about, being careful about your spending during good times, during bad times, during the market downturn. I'm curious about how your hiring practices have changed or evolved during, the market downturn and the subsequent months of, the market resurgence in crypto that we're seeing right now. I know that there was quite deep cuts to staffing in 2022, 2023. Are you guys, what's your current headcount out now for Binance? And are you ramping up hiring? Are you trying to maintain the level of staff that you have now?
So 2023, we saw cuts. And the cuts are really both a combination of voluntary and involuntary, right? So we don't try to keep our operations lean. And given that the market volume was much less, you don't need as many people. So we also took the chance at that point in time to enhance talent density, right? So by getting by moving out some of the sort of underperformance, it give us the ability to hire a stronger performance into the team, right? As constant refresh, constant improvement in talent density. So we have hired throughout the course of this year, and we continue hiring. Today, our headcount stands at about 5,400. We will definitely add a lot more before the end of the year. I envisage that we'll add another 1,000 more before the end of the year. It really depends. I mean, the pace of hiring is contingent on various things, including the notice period of people. So whether we end up at that figure, I'm not quite sure. But that is not the end, right? So we will continue to hire based on needs of the company. As I mentioned, we are deployed. We have gotten regulatory approval in 19 different jurisdictions. Every place we have a regulatory approval, there are domestic and local needs on that front. So we continue to hire as we secure more and more regulatory approval globally, and we hope to announce a few more before the end of the year.
So getting into that global perspective now, looking back at the whole map, there was a significant shift to that map around the time you came on last November, when Binance agreed to stop serving U.S.-based customers after settling those criminal charges with the U.S. government. Has cutting the U.S. completely out of Binance's global map for the moment shifted your global strategy? Like, for example, how have you made up that business, or has it meaningfully affected how you approach the rest of the world?
Actually, maybe just to correct that point, we have, for the longest time, we have not served US customers. So US customers, there's a licensing agreement with Binance.us, and that's the legitimate platform to serve US customers, right? So US customers have been cut off from our platform for some time now. So there's really no impact. That's really to formalize a practice that we have put in place with Binance.us having been in play for some time now.
I think Sander here is getting at the part of the indictment where they had said that Binance's international entity had been allowing users in the US who were part of the Binance VIP program.
That's way back in the past, right? So, but for the last few years, there are no US users. So I just say that, it's not overnight thing. They have not been on our platforms for some time now because they are served by Binance.us. And Binance.us is a totally different, separate entity. It has a different set of shareholders. It has a different board, different CEO altogether. So the deployment of .us, you have to check with you. But, for us, there's no impact because we have not been serving them for some time now. What we're really focusing on is really global deployment. And we have been focusing on that for the last few years. And we continue to see very strong growth globally in terms of user numbers, but also across the different type of clienteles. This year, we saw a huge bump in terms of number of institutions and corporates being onboarded. We see a lot more retail now coming on stream. So, which is why we are pretty bullish for the future.
I guess on that point of where you guys are serving users, there was also a Wall Street Journal report that had said they'd reviewed internal figures from Binance that revealed that about $90 billion in crypto assets had been traded in mainland China in a 1-month period. Is speaking of where you guys are operating and what contributes to your revenue, is mainland China, traders in mainland China, a part of Binance's revenue? Are they trading on the platform? What do you have to say about that report?
So I think all these are speculation. We don't release any data on that front. Again, we do not have active operations in China on that. So we respect global laws and regulations on that front. So other than that, there's really nothing much else for me to add.
So just, I guess, and then we can move on from that. So those reports, it was specifically that in May 2023, $90 billion of revenue came from mainland China. That was inaccurate? Are you saying that report?
Well, I mean, I'm not quite sure what's the basis of those reports, so I can't comment. I've not quite seen those reports. I don't know where they come from. But we have never released data, user data as sacrosanct and very important. So
okay.
we'll never do this stuff.
And apologies, just so we make sure that we're reporting it accurately. You're saying that Binance currently is not receiving major amounts of revenue, significant amounts of revenue from mainland China.
I think that we don't have active operations in China.
Speaking, the global political context and, all these different issues currently with Binance, some related to regulation, but some not. A story that I'm sure, has been of significant importance for you. Your employee, Tigran Gambaryan, who has been in custody in Nigeria since February. And I know you've spoken before about the importance of getting him released and how you're working with governments, including the U.S. government, to try to make this possible. And there are recent reports that the U.S. government is trying to ramp up efforts to make that happen. Just checking in on that. You personally, have you recently had any conversations with anyone in the U.S. government, be that President Biden or Secretary of State Blinken or anyone else, about these issues? And, it seems like there's been some difficulty moving this forward. Do you have any faith that there might be a movement here or a positive outcome, or does it seem like it's stalled a bit, these efforts?
First, I think let me stress, right? Tigran is held unfairly and unjustly. He has made fighting financial crime his lifelong mission, right? And he was invited to Nigeria. He is a functional expert. He's not a key decision maker. So we appeal to the Nigerian government to release Tigran on humanitarian grounds, right? So we have actually, I mean, if there are any outstanding issues we have with Nigerian government, we are very ready to enter into a discussion, just like we have entered into discussions with other global jurisdiction, global agencies, right? And we have resolved multiple issues around the world, be it in the States, places like Brazil, India. We are very collaborative. We want to resolve issues if there are any, right? There's really no need to hold any of our staff. And this will set a very bad precedent, send the chills down corporates. I mean, if you have any disagreement or any arguments with any corporates and you hold their staff, that is really, really, a bad precedent anywhere in the world to set. So we really appeal again to the Nigerian government to release him on humanitarian grounds. He's in huge pain. He has herniated disc. He can't walk properly. He's not getting proper medical treatment. So let him go home to his loved ones and families to make sure that he gets the proper medical treatment, to make sure it doesn't become permanent situation for him. Right? So in terms of his pain and his inability to walk. So I think that's very important. What we do hope is the US government will declare that he's unlawfully held on that front. We are working through various avenues to achieve that. And hopefully, with everybody's effort, we can get him home safe and sound very quickly. Right? As with any conversation with governments and regulatory agencies, we have to really respect the confidentiality clauses on that. So other than what I've said just now, I can't say much more on this subject matter.
Also talking, I mean, there's so much going on in the world as relates to regulation, but also your involvement or Binance's involvement with other governments on sensitive matters. Last month, there were allegations swirling on social media that Binance had frozen the wallets of all Palestinians at the behest of the Israeli military forces. And you dismissed this as FUD. You said that this was not true, that Binance had only frozen some accounts in accordance with internationally accepted anti-money laundering legislation. But the whole episode, I guess, did shed some light on, how Binance interacts with requests from government to censor certain wallets or freeze certain funds. And I guess on that subject, in terms of how Binance works on these subjects, does Binance only ever comply with requests from governments like Israel if they are legally obligated to do so? Or does Binance sometime comply with more informal requests from governments based on situation to situation?
So as a global financial citizen, as a global financial institutions, we're obligated to comply with international laws and regulations on that front. So these rules and requirements don't only apply to us, they apply to any institutions operating globally on that front. Right? So let me first clarify that. In any given year, we receive north of 60,000 law enforcement agency requests around the world. And I actually have provided a bit more context about what happened in the Israel case that arose last year on that front. Again, when we receive any law enforcement request, we will do our due diligence to make sure that it's a legitimate request, is legitimate that, there are some, illicit, there are some possible financial crimes that could be involved in those. So when the request came through, it involved more than 1,500 accounts, right? And after we do our due we don't think that's the proper number. And in the end, based on our due diligence, we do think that, there's about 220 that could be what is causing the problems. And those are the information that we have provided under, based on international court and based on international rule and regulations. And that's what happened. So if you look at the number of accounts that's affected, it's very little. It's only 0.1 or less than 0.1% of Palestinian accounts. We continue to serve users. That's very misinformed. That's pure allegatory pieces, which I have highlighted is pure FUD. Is so misinformed. And you read many articles which we will not speculate, we will not confirm, because really there's really no basis for many of this speculation. And on this particular episode, I have come out to clarify with exact figures to really give context of what we do.
So so just to make sure and to follow up on that and to make sure our viewers understand as well. So when a government or a government body like Israel comes to Binance and says, please censor these accounts or censor these wallets or freeze them,
we don't follow the orders blindly. Right? We will do proper due diligence and we will question, show us, proof and evidence, and we examine those very closely. As I mentioned, in any point in the year, we have, throughout the course, we receive 60,000 law enforcement agency CA requests globally from different agencies, not only in Israel, throughout the world, Middle Eastern countries, different parts of Asia Pacific, Latin America, etc., etc. And we follow, our internal protocol very closely to make sure that we only target possible bad actors in this space.
I know based on that response that there's already a lot of things in your guys' mind, a lot of things you guys have to look out for. But just to add to the plate of things that maybe you guys are watching right now, U.S. elections are coming up, and it's being thought that this is going to be a very contentious race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. I wanted to ask basically about, your thoughts on the election, on the fact that crypto has become something of, an issue of particular importance for some voters in the election, and what you make about how politicized crypto has become in the US during this election cycle.
Well, I mean, we take a global view, so we watch what's happening in the US with interest as well.
Right.
But I think it's just a testament of the growing influence of crypto globally, not only in the US, right? So that debate and discussion is not only happening in the US, but if you look at elections around the world, different parts, and crypto is brought up as an election agenda as well, right? But the mainstreaming of crypto has really begun in 2024, with more and more governments and regulators starting to regulate this space now. I mean, close to a third are regulating now compared to literally none a few years ago, right? Together with that, the ETF approval, with the institutions embracing it. I mean, when the largest asset money manager in the world, CEO Larry Finn, went from a skeptic to a believer, I think that marks a huge change. I think that's why it's quite natural for crypto to become a conversational debate, a topic during elections, including the US, because it is the industry of the future, right? So together with AI, blockchain, AI will form the infrastructure of many industry going forward. Many infrastructure will be built on these two technologies. The best and brightest talent around the world are working in this space. So these are very important sectors, and these are very important conversations to be had.
So, like you said, I mean, even though in the U.S. it can feel like this is the only country in the world, obviously this is not, and there is most of the world that has nothing to do with this presidential election. But like you also said, you guys are keeping a watch on this just like anything else, and it's gotten very polarized with Trump saying that if he isn't elected, crypto is, I think, going to hell was the term he said, and Kamala Harris recently had her first statements on the record in support of the industry. I guess, what do you think is the best outcome here for Binance and, also for the industry more broadly?
Well, I think regardless of what happened, I think the US election really is a matter for US citizens to decide. I think the rest of the world can only watch with interest, but we have no say in the outcome of that election. It's a decision to be made by US citizens, right? So we watch it with keen interest, as with the rest of the world. But regardless of what happened, I do think that this technology will continue its innovative impact globally. That will not change. The pace of adoption will continue to grow. We went from less than 1% in 2017. Today, we are 5 to 6%. I've highlighted the pace of growth even among our user base, right? And that pace will continue to be very rapid. And that is what you're seeing in the industry. More and more people are coming to this space. The pace of adoption is going to get much more rapid going forward. The pace of innovation will only pick up more, right? So I'm very confident. I mean, if you look at new use cases coming out, more government agencies and policymakers highlighting that they wish to be a crypto hub, not only of that region, but of the world, I think is a testament of the growing importance and influence of crypto. So, which is why I'm very bullish of the path forward for this space, regardless of election outcomes.
Well, on that note, we've now covered many touchy topics across the globe, which I'm sure you have to deal with at every hour of every day. But thank you so much for joining us. And I think I speak for Liz and I both when we say we really enjoyed the conversation and learning more about what you and Binance are up to.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.